I was 13 when a teacher told me to my face that I'd never amount to anything. Not in front of the class. Not even behind closed doors. She said it right there in the middle of a hallway while holding my failing math test in one hand and a stack of permission slips in the other. You're just not college material, sweetheart. Maybe look into something more hands-on. For your sake. I laughed. But not because it was funny. I laughed because it was easier than crying. That moment, it burned itself into me like a scar that never fully healed. And the worst part? She wasn't the first to say it. Growing up, I wasn't the smart kid. I wasn't the golden child. I wasn't the one who got straight A's or brought home shiny certificates. I was the one who forgot deadlines, who got distracted easily, who asked, why, too many times in class. I tried. God, I tried. But every time I reached for praise, all I got was pity, or worse, disappointment. At home, things weren't much better. My older brother was already taking AP courses. My younger sister could recite the periodic table for fun. Me? I was barely scraping C's, clutching onto passing grades like life vests in a storm I didn't know how to swim through. Dinner conversations were filled with words I didn't understand. And when my report cards came in, the only sound louder than my mother's sighs was the silence that followed them. No one ever asked if something was wrong. Maybe I needed help. They just assumed I was lazy. Stupid. A lost cause. By the time I hit high school, I had stopped raising my hand in class. Stopped trying. Stopped hoping. Because what was the point? People had already decided who I was. And I believed them. Until the day it all broke. It was senior year. College application season. The counselor handed me a list of trade schools and community programs, without even asking what I wanted. Most students like you, she said with a tight smile, do better with more practical options. Students like me. I remember walking out of her office, eyes stinging with tears I refused to let fall. And right there in the hallway, surrounded by banners that read, "Reach for the stars." I made a vow. I was going to burn their labels. Every single one. Not because I needed to prove them wrong, but because I needed to prove myself right. That night, I stayed up until 3 a.m. researching colleges. Not because I thought I could get in, but because I refused to let them be the only voices in my head. I printed application forms, borrowed test prep books, watched YouTube tutorials until my eyes hurt. I reached out to online forums, emailed professors, joined free study groups. Every rejection letter that came in only fueled me harder. I applied to schools that laughed in my face. And then I applied to one that didn't. It wasn't Ivy League. It wasn't prestigious. But it said yes. And that one yes. It saved me. Because college didn't just teach me subjects. It taught me how to fight. How to unlearn years of self-hate. How to rewrite the narrative they'd been feeding me since childhood. I wasn't dumb. I had ADHD. I wasn't broken. I learned differently. I wasn't lazy. I'd just been drowning. Now I was breathing. I found professors who saw potential in me, not problems. I found classmates who struggled like I did and still showed up anyway. I found strength I didn't even know I had. I worked 3 jobs, slept 4 hours a night, studied in bathroom stalls when libraries closed. I failed. A lot. But I always got back up. And somewhere between late-night essays and early morning lectures, something incredible happened. I started winning. I graduated with honors. Then I got into grad school. I started teaching. Not as a TA. Not as a substitute. As a professor. And on my first day standing in front of students who reminded me so much of myself, wide-eyed, terrified, full of questions, I opened with the story of that hallway. That teacher. That sentence. You're just not college material. And then I smiled. Neither was I. But I'm still here. I teach for the ones who were told to sit down, shut up, or aim lower. I teach for the kids who get overlooked, underestimated, discarded. I teach because someone has to break the cycle. They said I wouldn't make it. That I'd never belong in a college. But now I don't just belong. I lead. And that teacher? She's retired now. But I wonder, if she saw my name on the faculty list, would she recognize it? Probably not. Because people like her don't remember the kids they crush. But the kids? We remember everything. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But for me it came piping hot, dripping with sweat, sleepless nights, and years of buried shame turned into fuel. Because when you've been underestimated your whole life, success doesn't taste sweet. It tastes like survival. Let me tell you something people don't talk about: the trauma of being doubted. When the world tells you you're not good enough, smart enough, worthy enough, it doesn't just hurt. It roots inside you. You start censoring yourself before others do. You stop dreaming big because small feels safer. You shrink so no one else has to push you down. But I was done shrinking. My first year of college was a war zone. I was surrounded by people with better grades, better vocabularies, better confidence. While they breezed through group projects and polished presentations, I was relearning how to believe I belonged in the room. I failed 2 exams my first semester. My GPA dipped. I cried alone in library stairwells where no one could hear. I almost dropped out. But I didn't. Because I remembered all the faces that smiled when I stumbled. I remembered the teachers who snickered at my questions, the classmates who rolled their eyes when I asked for help, the counselor who shoved me toward a dead end before even hearing me out. They didn't think I had grit. They didn't know I was grit. So I did the thing most people don't expect from someone they've already written off. I got help. I got tested for learning disabilities. Processing speed. Turns out my brain wasn't broken, it was just wired differently. I qualified for academic support. Extra time. Tutoring. Tools I should have had years ago but was too ashamed to ask for. And once I stopped fighting my brain and started working with it, everything changed. I discovered something wild: I was actually good at learning, just not the way they tried to teach me. I used color-coded maps for note-taking. Voice memos instead of written journals. Flashcards taped to the ceiling above my bed. I joined study groups even when it terrified me. I volunteered in class until my voice stopped shaking. Bit by bit I climbed. Sophomore year I got a 3.6 GPA. Junior year, 3.9. Senior year, I was tutoring freshmen who had once looked at me like I didn't belong. Every semester I survived was a silent screw you to every person who had doubted me. But I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for all of us. For every kid who gets passed over because their brilliance doesn't come in straight A packages. For every girl told she's too emotional to lead, or every boy told he's too distracted to succeed. For the students with English as a second language, or the ones battling invisible illnesses, or the ones working night shifts to afford textbooks. We are college material. But the system is just not built for us. So I decided to break the damn system. After graduation I didn't stop. I got my master's degree with a thesis focused on education accessibility. My research went viral on academic Twitter. 1 paper turned into 3. 1 conference turned into invitations. And then came the call. A teaching position had opened. It was just a visiting lecturer role at first, nothing fancy. But it was at the same college where my guidance counselor said I'd never get accepted. I stood in front of that building on my first day, hair curled, nerves electric, lesson plan clutched in trembling hands, and I thought, is this what redemption feels like? But it wasn't redemption. It was evolution. Because I wasn't here to prove them wrong anymore. I was here to build what I never had. That first lecture? I started it with a confession. I used to sit where you sit. I used to think I wasn't smart enough. College material? They said I wasn't even notebook material. But look at me now. Some students laughed. Some leaned in. 1 girl teared up. And from that moment I knew. I wasn't just teaching content. I was teaching hope. Now every class I teach is a rebellion against mediocrity. Every struggling student is a chance to rewrite a story. Every paper I grade, every office hour I hold, every email I answer at 2 a.m., it's all part of the mission. Because someone once threw me away. But I climbed out of the trash. No. I build tables for others like me to sit at. No permission needed. You ever look someone in the eye and watch them choke on their own words? As I have. And let me tell you, it's better than any degree, paycheck, or standing ovation I've ever earned. The first time it happened, I was invited to speak at a regional education conference. The room was packed, professors, school administrators, even some of the very same high school counselors who once told me to my face that I wasn't built for academia. They said I was too emotional, that I struggled to keep up, that college wasn't for everyone, and that I should maybe try a trade school, or take some time to figure myself out. Funny how none of them said that when they were in the audience now, taking notes. I stood on that stage behind a podium taller than my self-esteem used to be, and I told my story. Not for pity. Not even for applause. I told it because they needed to hear it. And I didn't sugarcoat a damn thing. I spoke about being underestimated, about undiagnosed learning differences, about the way students like me fall through the cracks of a system obsessed with standardization. I called out the lazy labeling, the quiet biases, the wounds left behind by every guidance counselor who ever said, maybe college just isn't the right path for you. And then I flipped the script. I showed them data, research, case studies, proof that when students are supported, not sorted into boxes, they thrive. I gave them statistics that shook their assumptions and stories that cracked their silence. You could hear a pin drop. After the talk, people lined up to thank me. They used words like groundbreaking and transformative. They asked for copies of my slides, links to my papers. And the irony? One of the first people in line was him, Mr. Larkin, my old high school counselor. The same man who looked me in the eye when I was 16 and said, "You're not really college material, are you?" Now he stood before me, gray-haired and shaking, holding a pen and notebook like a freshman trying not to miss office hours. "You've really come a long way," he said, eyes darting to the floor. I smiled. Not with anger. Not with arrogance. With clarity. "No," I replied, steady. "I always had it in me. You just didn't see it." That moment didn't erase the damage he did. But it did something better. It made me the voice I once needed. And that power. It's addictive. Since then, my inbox has been flooded. Students, parents, educators. Some thank me for validating their struggle. Others ask how to help kids like me succeed. A few even ask me to mentor them. And then there are the universities, the same ones that wouldn't even give me an interview back then. Now they're inviting me to teach their teachers. One even quoted my work in their curriculum update. I've seen my words printed in textbooks, displayed on slides, shared in meetings. I've walked into conference rooms and found my own face on the welcome banner. And every time it happens, I remember the cold fluorescent lights of the counselor's office where I was told I wasn't enough. I remember the classroom where my hand trembled before I raised it. I remember walking the halls of my high school, head down, ashamed to even dream out loud. Now, I dream on microphones. I dream from the front of classrooms. I dream into policy papers that shape national standards. And every single doubt they threw at me, I built a foundation out of it. Because here's the truth they don't want to admit. The ones who struggle, the ones they overlook, the ones who start at the bottom. We fight harder. And when we rise, we don't just take seats at the table. We build new ones. Tables where everyone gets a damn chair. People like to wrap stories up in neat little bows. You overcame. You proved them wrong. Now you're successful. Happy ending, right? But this isn't a fairy tale. It's a revolution. Because I didn't fight my way into academia just to hang a diploma on my wall and call it a day. I didn't climb the ladder just to admire the view. I did it to drop the rope back down. See, the real victory isn't what I became. It's what I unlock for others now. I see them every day, the students who sit in the back of the room, clutching their notebooks like shields, speaking only when called on, their voices barely above whispers. They remind me of who I was. And I make sure they don't stay invisible. I make space for the students with accents, with quiet trauma, with part-time jobs and family obligations, with dreams too big for their zip code. The ones the system calls at risk. I call them my people. I know what it's like to go home to unpaid bills and still be expected to write a flawless essay. I know what it's like to be hungry, not just for food but for possibility. So I built a classroom that feeds both. We don't just teach in my lectures. We unlearn. We unlearn the lies they've been told. That intelligence has one shape, one speed, one sound. That struggle means failure. That worth is defined by GPA. And I watch the sparks catch. The first time a student who failed their midterm gets a standing ovation for their final project. The first time someone who said, "I'm just not good at this," realizes they just hadn't been taught the right way. The first time a student emails me crying saying, "I didn't think I could make it until your class." Those moments? They're worth more than any keynote speech or published article. But I won't lie, there are days it still stings. Like when colleagues glance over my credentials with skepticism, because I didn't go to an Ivy. Or when I sit on a hiring committee and hear someone casually dismiss an applicant because their writing isn't polished. I want to scream, "Do you know how many brilliant minds you've silenced because their brilliance doesn't sound like yours?" But I don't scream. I speak. Purry. Unapologetically. Because I earned this voice. Every broken piece of my past sharpened it. Every door slammed in my face gave it force. And now I use it to pry open every damn door I can. I mentor. I advocate. I write policy recommendations. I fund scholarships out of my own salary. I meet with school counselors and ask them how many not college material kids they've written off this year. And I make sure they never forget that one of those kids is standing right in front of them, teaching at a university they once thought I'd never set foot in. So no, this isn't the end of my story. It's the spark at the start of someone else's. Because I didn't come this far just to be the exception. I came to change the rule. Success isn't a corner office. It isn't a salary with 6 zeros. It's not even a tenured position on a panel full of people who once doubted you. For me, success was waking up one morning and realizing I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Not the teacher who smirked when I asked for help. Not the counselor who told me trade school might suit me better. Not the classmates who whispered affirmative action behind my back when I got accepted into a top graduate program. Not even the ghost of who I used to be. The girl who once believed those voices were telling the truth. I used to think success meant being seen. Now I know it means seeing yourself fully and refusing to shrink. I don't wear designer heels to class. I wear sneakers because I'm running between lectures and community meetings. I don't quote dead philosophers to sound intelligent. I quote the kids in my neighborhood who taught me what survival really looks like. I don't show off degrees on my wall to impress guests. I show them to my nieces and nephews and say, "This is what happens when you bet on yourself, even when no one else does." The world tried to define me with labels. But labels are just limits in disguise. They said I wasn't college material. Well, I became the material they teach now. They said I was too emotional, too reactive, too intense. Now students call me the most relatable professor on campus. They said I didn't fit in. Good. Because I wasn't made to fit in, I was made to break molds. You see, I've stopped chasing the kind of success that requires me to bury parts of myself. The version of me that survived homelessness, food stamps, heartbreak, failure. That version deserves to be celebrated, not hidden. So I bring her with me everywhere I go. She stands beside me when I speak at conferences. She holds the mic when I talk about academic reform. She's the fire in my voice when I look a student in the eyes and say, "You are not broken. You are just underestimated." I've learned that true success isn't loud. It's quietly defiant. It's saying no to what the world expects and yes to what makes your soul expand. It's turning trauma into purpose, rejection into redirection, and scars into strength. And most of all, success is freedom. Freedom to teach how I want. Freedom to live how I choose. Freedom to walk into a room full of people who once doubted me, and still choose kindness over vengeance. Because that's the real twist in my story. I didn't just rise, I healed. Not to let them off the hook, but to unhook myself from their poison. Now I'm not just a teacher. I'm living, breathing, walking proof that your beginning doesn't get to decide your ending. I don't need their applause. My piece is loud enough. If you've ever been told you weren't good enough, this is your sign to rise. Drop a comment if you've ever been underestimated. Like this if you've ever proven someone wrong. And don't forget to share this with someone who needs a reminder. You are not what they said you were. You are everything they feared you'd become. Subscribe for more true stories of betrayal, resilience, and unstoppable comebacks. Because your comeback story starts now.